Welcome to Now Innovating, a research to impact series at the University of Calgary. I'm your host, Julia McGregor.
December is the month of giving and the wrap-up of the university's campaign for the United Way of Calgary and area. The United Way aims to improve life outcomes and to build strong communities by focusing on social sector solutions that address mental health, socioeconomic well-being, social inclusion, and healthy relationships. This episode, I'm excited to chat with Julia Imanoff. She is a registered nurse, an IS High doctoral scholar in the Faculty of Nursing, and a social innovator and serial entrepreneur. Julia wants to help humanity flourish by promoting healthy social connections, especially those between parent and child. She researches experiences that can help or hinder those connections, which, paired with her clinical expertise, has allowed her to co-found the social enterprise, the Brief Crisis Therapy Institute.
Hi, Julia. Welcome to Now Innovating.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Julia.
So this is gonna be so great. So other than, us sharing the same first name, you're also a University of Calgary podcast host.
I am. Actually, we are almost in our second series of the Mindfulness podcast as part of the University of Calgary's mental health and wellness strategy. So it's exciting. Season 1 was all about managing stress during peak COVID times and how to kind of reduce anxiety and improve creativity. Season 2, we're trying to step outside of that a little bit more and create a mindful intention.
Sounds good. So hopefully people tune in, check that out. So in addition to, the University of Calgary's campus mental health strategy that you've mentioned, mental health is also one of the United Way of Calgary and areas of focus. And, supporting mental health really seems to be at the forefront of, your passion as like a clinician and a researcher. Can you just tell us a little bit more about your doctoral research?
Yeah, my research is looking at women's experience of psychological birth trauma. So it kind of blends my clinical background being a perinatal nurse specialist and labor and delivery nurse by background, but also the research approach I use is hermeneutics, which is a qualitative interpretive method. And it really looks at context, the historical context, the social context, how things have come to be, and mental health has a very complicated and long history, especially pulling apart concepts like the term PTSD, the diagnosis, when it came into fruition, and how it's being used, especially now how it's being used in perinatal mental health or women's mental health.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And you're in your candidacy now of your PhD, right?
I am actually just finishing up my analysis.
Oh my goodness. Oh, well, you're gonna have a very busy, busy winter for you there. So Julia, what was the moment for you when you did realize that your clinical expertise, that you mentioned your background in nursing, and your research area could really inform a social innovation?
I think that's a great question. I don't know if I would say there's an exact moment in time that happened, but it was more like a series of moments and conversations that kind of led into the ideas that what I do in my work, research and clinical, can actually solve social problems or work towards solving social problems. Some of those conversations were around research, especially the type of research I do that looks at contexts and trends and shifts and patterns. So that kind of helps identify some gaps. And then looking at some of my professional conversations with other nurses and the unique opportunities and how nurses are situated to really step up in this social innovation space to start solving problems in a new and maybe different way than how things have been done in the past. So it's kind of a nuanced way of thinking that I think all these conversations has kind of come to.
I love that. That's really interesting. I think, just getting people inspired and, understanding really what social innovation is. So I think that kind of leads to my next question of you've started 2 companies that are both kind of social enterprises. Like, what does success look like for you as a social innovation?
I think success in social innovation and entrepreneurship is really that sustainable, positive impact towards reducing the social problem that you're trying to address. And so ultimately, if your social innovation is a success, you'd work yourself out of a job. Right. But that's kind of the goal, so that the problem would be so minimal at that point that that solution doesn't fit anymore. Alternatively, it also means that you need to pivot because the problem might change, because social problems are not stagnant and just staying the same across time. Things constantly are changing, and so the solutions often have to adapt as well.
Oh, wonderful. That's so insightful. I love that answer too. I was saying before we started recording that just looking at your LinkedIn bio, and you're so impressive, and I think probably many people are like, how does she do it? How does this Julia be so succeed? So you have a lot of responsibilities, competing priorities, and as a clinician researcher, other than, just like making time for things, like what strategies or tips would you give to someone who's hesitant to, taking that next step of moving their research to a social innovation or, having an impact outside of just clinical practice?
I think there's a lot of like task-specific skills that I definitely draw on. Being a parent and through COVID, through a lot of my social entrepreneur journey, there's been a lot of challenges. But I think really taking that step beyond clinical practice or even research into that social innovation space, the biggest questions that I keep coming up to myself and also I get asked by other people are, how do you have capacity to do this work and do it well? And I think that's often a question that you have to balance, and it means saying no to some things that you might want to say yes to, and also being very mindful of overcommitting, which I feel I've probably done many a time, and then having to scale back and realize where that line of capacity is. But I also think it balances out with another question of, if not you, then who? Because there's also this calling that sometimes we get to do this type of work, and whether that's because of your passion in an area, your clinical expertise, or maybe a personal experience that you're drawn into this work, and you might be the best person to do the work. And so if it's not you, then who? Maybe there's other people doing the work, but maybe they're not going to do it in the same way that you would.
Wow, that's a soundbite if I've ever heard one. That's beautiful. You should. I want to make that a T-shirt. Actually, that's great. If anyone does not feel inspired by that statement, I think they will now. Again, as I said, you have lots of community responsibilities, and one of the other hats that you wear that we haven't really talked about yet is that you're a social innovation manager at Innovate Calgary, and I'm just curious about what supports that the Social Innovation Hub offers for those looking to move their research to impact.
The social innovation team, and really all of Innovate Calgary, really focuses on supporting researchers and founders from that first prototype to first investment. There's a lot of challenges that can happen in those stages. Innovate Calgary actually supported me through my business creations as well, so it's nice to be on the other side, now supporting as well. And typically there's great expertise in Innovate Calgary. The intellectual property team has deep expertise in planning and creating strategies of how to protect your intellectual property. And so being able to leverage that team's expertise working with Innovate Calgary is a huge asset. But even more so too, I think that typically we think of intellectual property as patents and patent protection strategies, which doesn't always land with the social innovation work that we do. But we're starting to see a lot more supports in developing new and emergent strategies to do a broader range of intellectual property supports that really fit the nuanced experiences of social innovators.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I think some people don't realize too that Innovate Calgary is such a great resource for University of Calgary members as well as community partners and people who are not affiliated with the university. So I think people should definitely check that out. Thank you so much, Julia, for joining me today on Innovating. It's just been an absolute pleasure talking with you. And yeah, just all the best with the finishing of your PhD.
Thank you so much.
Learn more about the Brief Crisis Therapy Institute by visiting their website, briefcrisistherapyinstitute.com. To learn how to move your research to impact within the Innovation at UCalgary ecosystem, visit ucalgary.ca/innovation.